Most of TSW3's UK routes are based in England, with only 2 exceptions to the rule at the time of uploading. Today we will be taking a look at the Glasgow Cathcart Circle Line, which was the first Scottish route made for TSW. This is kind of a follow-up to the video I made about the Glasgow subway add-on in TS Classic, and the remade ScotRail Express review, for that matter. This thing was released in June 2021 and costs 37 New Zealand dollars. And while that's better value for money than, say for instance, ScotRail Express or the Dovetail Bahn, I would still advise waiting for a sale and picking up Cathcart Circle then if you don't have it already. The route focuses on a small part of the suburban rail network in Glasgow, specifically the Cathcart Circle itself, plus the branches to Neilston and Newton. While it's a very short route, it is at least non-linear, and still offers a good amount of service variation. As for the time period, I've heard that this route is set in 2014, before the Class 385s entered service. The only train that comes with this route is the Class 314 in the ScotRail Saltire livery. For anyone who doesn't know, the Class 314 is a 3-car electric multiple unit that is essentially the same as the slightly older Class 313, albeit without third rail pickups. 16 of these things were built by British Rail Engineering Limited in 1979, and they remained in service for 40 years before final retirement in 2019. Quite bizarrely, the only survivor of this class, number 314209, was converted into a hydrogen train, while I would have preferred to see it preserved as a proper 314 and, maybe, restored to her original BR blue and grey condition. But at least we still have the TS Classic version, which depicts the 314 in a sizable variety of liveries. It's bizarre to see only one livery provided for the 314 in-game, since only 7 of them actually carry the Saltire livery in real life. The other 9 remained in the old SPT Carmine and Cream livery right to the end. But the good thing is, you can get community-made SPT reskins off of the Creators Club. While I don't blame you for thinking that the route is spoiled by its short length, especially since I do that sort of thing most of the time, you do at least have 3 different types of services to run, although they are all short commuter services. You've got the service round the Cathcart Circle itself, either going clockwise or anti-clockwise, which only covers 8 miles of track, but it takes around 31 minutes to complete due to the closely spaced stations. You've also got the runs to Neilston or Newton via Mount Florida. Incidentally, Newton is also served by trains coming off the Argyll line from Partick and going down to Lark Hall or Motherwell, but those services are not represented in-game. Neilston is unusual because it has the usual dual-side platform arrangement despite being the end of the line, with trains having to pull forward into a reversing siding before heading back to Glasgow. Besides the regular passenger services, you also have the option of doing empty stock moves to and from Shields Depot. Overall, the stations look very well modelled, with Muir End being my favourite station on the route. I would say Glasgow Central is a close second, but this area is spoiled by how unrealistically Spartan it is. In real life, you will see an awful lot more than just the Cathcart Circle, Neilston and Newton services at the station, but I can understand why this area is so quiet in-game. Even so, it still feels empty and lifeless when all you're seeing are the Class 314s. I have mixed thoughts about the driving experience with the Class 314. She handles decently well, although I always thought that the acceleration was a little too fast for a unit that was 35 years old back in 2014. Not helping the situation is the position of the driver's camera, as the field of view makes the cab feel very cramped, especially since it's set too far forward for you to see the controls and look out the window at the same time. For whatever reason, there are no 6-car trains as seen on this route in timetable mode, but in one of the scenarios you do get to drive a pair of 314s, so why we only see them running solo in timetable mode is anyone's guess. The Class 314 is not the only thing you can drive on this route, but it is the only thing you can drive in a prototypical manner. If you have the Northern Trains Pennine route, the Class 47 and Mark II coaches from that DLC will layer onto Cathcart Circle to represent a rail tour. This is despite the fact that it's British Rail 1980 rolling stock, which looks out of place on a route set in the early 2010s. One thing that helps to keep the route interesting is the varying distances between stations. Take the Glasgow Central to Neilston run for example. Between Glasgow Central and Cathcart, 2 stations are often less than a mile apart, but once you get past Muir End, they can get up to a few miles apart because of the reduced population density in that area. On the western side of the circle, between Cathcart and Pollokshields West, the stations are often less than 3/4 of a mile apart, so you need to keep your wits about you to avoid overshooting the platforms. As one would expect from a commuter service, the timetable doesn't have much padding, but for the longest time it was unrealistically tight. When I was driving an anti-clockwise Cathcart Circle or Neilston service, and on the section from Pollokshields East to Mount Florida, you were somehow expected to get from station to station in less than 45 seconds. This issue has since been fixed, with the schedule now allowing at least 90 seconds between stations. Most of the services call it all stations, but there is one morning peak time service to Neilston and back that skips several stations in both directions. While I do like the scenery on the line down to Neilston, especially once you get past Whitecraigs, I think the branch to Newton is very boring because every station on that section, except Kirk Hill, just has a basic island platform. The section through Mount Florida, Cross Hill and Queen's Park is quite unusual because it runs through a narrow cutting below the adjacent buildings. The western side of the circle, through Langside, doesn't really have any especially noteworthy scenery by comparison. All the stations on that section have simple island platforms. Considering that you'll often see stop markers specifically referencing the German haggis itself, I hope that Dovetail eventually brings the Class 380 to TSW as well, complete with both the 3 and 4 car variants please. That way, we would get the different experiences of driving an old train from 1979 alongside a much newer train from 2011, with the latter having a combined throttle and brake lever instead of separate levers for each function. Not to mention that the 380 could also layer onto the Edinburgh to Glasgow route and run alongside the 385s. As I should have expected, Dovetail's route building skills were still a bit sloppy on Cathcart Circle. For instance, just after leaving Shawlands, you go across the Glasgow to Stranraer line on an overbridge, while seeing the same house assets copied and pasted over and over again. While this would have made the DLC's development easier and quicker, it still spoils the immersion. Then, at the next station on the line, Maxwell Park, I noticed that there wasn't any proper grass detailing in the area, apart from the track's immediate surroundings. Before I end the video, I want to make 3 suggestions for UK passenger routes that Dovetail, or a third-party developer, could make for TSW, as long as they can sort out licensing deals with the respective train operating companies. A remake of the Southampton to Bournemouth route in TS Classic, albeit with an extension to Weymouth. The original TS version includes the Lymington branch, so that would need to be added in TSW as well. The included motive power could just be the Class 444 and 450 Desiros in the old South West Trains liveries, unless DTG can sort out a licensing deal with the current TOC, South Western Railway. Second suggestion is the Tyne Valley Line, which runs for 58 miles from Newcastle to Carlisle with 16 stations. It's operated by Northern Trains, whose livery will feature in the upcoming Glossop Line add-on, and this Tyne Valley route could include the Class 156 and 158 Sprinters. Besides the full-length services from Newcastle to Carlisle, you could also simulate the shuttle that only goes as far as Metro Centre, as well as a little stub of the rare Chat Hill service. Third suggestion is the Exeter to Plymouth section of the Great Western Main Line, complete with the branches to Exmouth, Paignton and Gunnislake. This route has some very nice scenery, complete with the coastal section through Dawlish and Teignmouth, followed by the winding and steeply graded line past Newton Abbot. It would present a very challenging experience for drivers, especially on the Tamar Valley Line, and the included motive power could all be in Great Western Railway liveries. Specific trains that would be appropriate for this route include the Class 150/2 and 158 Sprinters, as well as the Class 802 Hitachi IET. Cathcart Circle is, in my opinion, one of the better routes that Dovetail have made for TSW. The service and scenery variation is enough to make up for the route's tiny size, but I wish that Dovetail had made it a little bit longer by adding the lines to Weems Bay or East Kilbride. Of course, if they were to add either branch, they would need to add more motive power in the form of the Class 380 or 156. As it stands now, this is a good route if you just want to go for a short drive that doesn't take any more than 36 minutes to complete.